how to face one's challenges joyfully. Now, my original thought when I came to this topic was maybe what I should address is the topic of tapasya. But I thought, well, if I put that as the title, it's a little bit off-putting to think about tapasya. Because people have many different, you might say, impressions of what that topic is of tapasya. It sometimes sounds a little bit not something that one would normally enjoy doing. But really, if we understand it properly, we see that it has an important role to play in the spiritual search. And essentially, tapasya means being firm and staying centered within the self and doing that which resists being pulled out of our center. Master used to say, stay always in the self. Come down from the self to engage in daily activity, to engage in work, to be with people, to do your duty in life, and then always return to the self. But of course, there's forces in this world that we come down from that higher self, engage in the world that continue to pull us out. And tapasya is that resistance to that. And you could say it's a joyful embracing of those challenges that want to pull us out. And so we have to use conscious effort to be able to remain in the self or to return to self, and strengthen ourselves. And so often these practices that people formally call tapasya type practices, what they're doing is you might say, strengthening us to be able to do those things that will allow us to remain in the self. But really, from a spiritual point of view, we shouldn't really think of these things as grim or somehow unpleasant. They're just the natural things that ultimately will bring us joy. And so consequently, I think a better way to look at it is the application of this in daily life is embrace the challenges that we face joyfully. And so applying to tapasya, tapasya itself should be joyful. There's that saying that Master used to use. He would say, a sad saint is a sad saint indeed. And so consequently, and part of the spiritual path, of course, is if one is doing penance, for example, or one is, maybe another word might be sacrifice, because all of us are called upon in life to sacrifice. To approach sacrifice or to approach tapasya or to do penance in some way with, it's grim, it's hard, it's difficult. It sort of seems like we approach it in that way sometimes, as if I'm being punished by life. Well, that's not really how we should approach sacrifice. It should be a joyful offering, and true tapasya should be in its own way, should be joyful in its own way. Yes, disciplined, yes, and we have to strengthen ourselves to get to that point. But ultimately, its tapasya should be really something that strengthens us in order to free us. Now, in our path of Kriya Yoga, in our path of practicing various yoga techniques associated with Kriya, we come upon this word Kriya, which means action. And it is derived from the same root that the word karma is derived from. It's action, but it's a certain kind of action. Now, karmic action are those things that are propelled by our karma, cause and effect. And I work off my karma. We could say that you might say we're propelled by it. We're forced by it, by things that the pendulum is swinging back. But there's another kind of action, and that's Kriya action. And the two are both action, but karmic action is, you might say, something that's imposed upon us by our karma, whereas Kriya action is that action which frees us. it's spiritual action. So you see, karma if you apply that to Kriya Yoga, it's that action, that Kriya action to do that actually frees us from karma. And so consequently, we should really, any spiritual action that has as its purpose to free us, in a sense, I'm speaking broadly here, maybe not technically specifically, but in a broad sense, you could say that's a Kriya action that is going to consciously uplift us and free us from the bondage of karma. And that is what Tapasya really is. It's those actions that will free us and keep us from going out into the world and engaging in more karmic action and karma of getting involved in the world. But when we learn to restrain, you might say, the impulses, well, that's what Tapasya really is. And so the way you could say to approach that is to consciously counteract that outward action, not with a sense of, oh my gosh, it's penance, it's hard, or challenges come to us. Oh, this is a hard challenge. I need to overcome this. What we're doing there is we're just engaging in karmic action of expiating karma, and we don't like it. And so that just continues to put more karma into motion. But if we can learn to approach that circumstances, those challenges that come to us in daily life, if we can approach them in a way that uplifts us, then you could say everything in life then becomes and I'm using the word broadly here, everything in that way becomes a Kriya action, something that it happens to us. It's not onerous, but it's an opportunity. So you could say it's turning challenges into opportunities and acting in a way that uplifts us, which means what? It means acting joyfully in whatever the circumstances are that occurs to us in life. Now, that's a pretty big challenge, but isn't this what a saint does? A saint who has transcended, and by that, when I say a saint, it's somebody who has transcended that ego consciousness, that the ups and downs, the likes and dislikes. And a saint is somebody, of course, whose consciousness rests in God, or somebody whose consciousness rests in joy. And in that sense, to be able to see joy in everything we do, see joy in every circumstance, and be able to focus on that, this, of course, is what makes a saint. And that, of course, is also those actions that are not engaged in creating new karma for ourselves. So this, you could say, for all of us, this is what we're trying to achieve in life. This is the direction we're wanting to go. And so how do we do this? Well, of course, that's the hard part, isn't it? Is to be able to do those things that are going to, in every moment, to be able to extract the joy out of that moment. And this is why we practice. This is why we practice Kriya. It's why we meditate. And in little tiny ways, this is what we should try to do. Now, I guess in a sense, you could say it's training. Now, it's a novel way of looking at life, you might say, for most people to try to. It's like when you're eating healthy, you can that people think in terms of penance. They need to do penance, and if they do something, it's like eating a healthy food. Some people, they have bad habits in terms of their diet. So what they're going to do is they're going to, I'm going to take up I'm going to set good habits and I'm going to start eating healthy food. But of course, in the process of eating the healthy food, they have a frown on their face and they don't enjoy anything. And so consequently, they're doing the right thing and they feel they're making themselves healthy, but they're not enjoying what they're doing. And so but then their alternative is to enjoy it, is to scrap the healthy food and start going back to the fried food, the high sugars and carbohydrates. And it's either one or the other. Another choice would be to find healthy food that tastes good. And I think this is, I've always, I think some people think that if you're going to eat healthily, it shouldn't taste very good. And and I don't think that's the way to go. You should find a way to do the right thing, but do it in a way that you're going to enjoy doing it. And you can see if you can create habits in yourself that you can enjoy doing these. If you want to exercise, try to find ways that you're going to enjoy your exercise. Try finding ways you'll have a good habit, create good habits in your life and enjoy them. And if you can live this way, rather than doing something that's good for you, oh, it's good for me, but I don't like it. Well, you're just working against your own natural inclinations or your body's inclinations or your sensory inclinations, and it doesn't work. This is why people, when we tell people to meditate and try to get people to begin meditating, I think the important thing is, one, regularity. You have to keep trying. But two, meditate only as long as you can feel uplifted. In other words, upward. And then try to little by little extend that further and further, and to stop your meditation when you're on an upward swing. Don't wait for you to be, many people, when they meditate until they become bored, or they meditate until they become restless. And then when they leave their meditation, what happens is they carry the impression of, oh, that was boring, or that was restless, I don't want to do that. And this very subtly becomes ingrained within them. And they feel, well, I should meditate, I should overcome that boredom. You could say that's tapasya, to be able to just sit there and endure it. No, well, yes and no. It's a common attitude, but it's not going to be the successful attitude. What we want to do, tapasya, if possible, in the right spirit, should be something that we're aligning ourselves with forces that ultimately will bring us joy. And we should practice being able to do whatever we can do in a joyful spirit. It's not, it's just not endurance or determination alone. Now, excuse me, I don't mean that we don't have to be self-disciplined. And I realize that this is aspirational of what I'm sharing with you today. But nevertheless, remember, the spiritual path should be a path of joy. And it is a path of joy if we learn to, you might say, crack the nut to be able to extract that joy out of what we're doing. And I think you'll find, it's been my experience, at least, the longer I've been on this path and the longer I've meditated, that I came onto this path with an idea of I was going to be disciplined, which I needed as a young man. I needed to discipline myself, but I realized that will only take you so far. If you can't extract joy out of the day-to-day, you're not going to have the inner motivation to stick with it, because those outward tendencies of wanting to find happiness and that desire for happiness, which is a worthy desire, it's something ingrained in all of us, is going to discipline alone is not going to satisfy that. And so we have to extract, to whatever way we can, extract the joy from whatever it is that we're doing. And so you have to, in meditation, this is what Master said. He says, meditate on joy, meditate for joy, meditate with joy. And it's not something that we can expect to just wait for to come to us. We have to actually insert that into what we're doing. And then we find we begin to receive the benefits of it. We're always, attaining that attitude is the essence of what the spiritual path is about. And it's not, and some people think, well, that means I can't live a pleasant life. And it's not wrong to seek a pleasant life, or it's not wrong to seek things that feel good, or that are, that, because sometimes when we talk about tapasya, when we think in terms of consciously doing things difficult, and I even say that from time to time, as a sense of self-discipline training, is do the difficult thing, not always the easy thing. Well, it doesn't mean it's wrong to do the easy thing, and it's probably not necessary to constantly be taking the hard part. And so it's not wrong to lead a pleasant life. Just don't do it at the expense of, you might say, abandoning your ideals, doing it at the expense of forming a bad habit, doing it at the expense of abandoning what your higher self really knows and really wants. And seeking God does not mean seeking hardship. Those anchorites that go out and harm their own body or scourge themselves. It doesn't mean you have to go out and keep your arm up in the air or do those things purposefully, but it means seeking the highest and accepting whatever challenges Divine Mother gives to us of her will. You don't have to go out and seek it. Some people come onto the path of seeking God realization, and they're very fervent, and they seek out challenges or hardships, let's say. I want to work off my karma quickly, and so I go out and I seek difficult things, and so I can work out in this lifetime, Divine Mother. I want to work out all of my karma. I'm not sure that's a wise thing to say. I admire the aspirational, devotional approach to that, the fervor one has, but really, let come what Divine Mother will send to us. In other words, we don't need to go out and seek our challenges, but the harder thing, I think, and the more useful thing, let's say, is to be able to accept those challenges that come to us and to deal with them, again, coming back to this theme, a deal with what comes of itself joyfully, or keeping one's center, or peacefully. The challenges of the day for each of us are enough. We don't have to go out and consciously create, you might say, more difficulties for ourselves. And I think this applies, this idea of looking whatever comes to us in life as a challenge is, you could say, is approaching it joyfully in a spirit. And how do we do that? It's a spirit of self-offering ourselves to respond to whatever comes to ourselves. So if we have a challenge comes to us, we respond to it in joy, which means on a very deep level, we're responding to whatever comes to us in the accompaniment of God consciousness with us. So to the extent that we reply to everything that comes to us, respond to everything that comes to us in God consciousness, that in itself, God, whether we use the term God, whether we use the term joy, or one of the other attributes, it's all responding in the proper way. And you'll find that as you begin to do this, everything in life begins to flow easily. And you begin to, if you make it a conscious effort, you begin to see that within every circumstance, there's that opportunity. And I think we need to do this as individuals, living up to our highest ideals in the highest state possible. But I think as a Sangha, as Ananda Sangha, we need to also respond, you could say, in a joyful way together, as responding to challenges joyfully, because circumstances affect us as individuals, but circumstances also affect us as groups. Like each of our centers, this pandemic that has happened recently, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for each one of us individually. It's been a challenge for each one of us as a family. It's been a challenge for each one of us as, in terms of Ananda Sangha, as a center. But that challenge has presented us is an opportunity to respond to it in the proper way. And you could say it almost is Divine Mother is testing us. And testing is an aspect of the spiritual path. I don't think, I think sometimes we think that, well, if I seek God, sometimes Master will bless me. And don't we go to temple to receive God's blessings to make our path smoother? I don't know if that's really what is happening when we go and we ask for God's blessings. What we really are asking is for God to be with us in whatever our challenges are, to God to be there with us so that we can approach every circumstance in our life in the right spirit. Because as Master said, circumstances are always neutral. They're good, they're bad, they're difficult, according to how we receive them, and according to how we respond to them, and we make them good or bad. I think if you could sum that up, I think you would say, don't sacrifice, you could say, your peace, don't sacrifice your joy, don't sacrifice your right attitude in order to receive whatever it is, or to achieve whatever it is that your goals are outside of yourself. That ability to maintain peace, that ability to maintain joy is your goal. The outer is just, you might say, an opportunity for us to be able to respond in properly into whatever happens in this world. Now, it's as easy for me to say this, but I think all of us understand that if we've taken up the spiritual path, what we have done is we've said to the Divine Mother, we've said to the Guru, I am open to receive challenges in life. I'm open to being corrected, course corrected. I'm open to taking up the mantle and fighting this battle of life. And that openness, you could say, is one of the first marks of a spiritual devotee, to realize that I am in a relationship with life and I'm open to receiving. And this is the mark of a disciple. Once we pledge our allegiance to a guru, to take up the spiritual path, to say, I'm open to receive whatever comes and challenge does come to me. Then you could say, but I'm open also, and I pray for thy will be done, and that thy be with me in everything I do. And if we have that openness and that devotion of heart to ask God to be with us, to face whatever challenges we have, how can we help but not be? On some deep level, how can we not be joyful? There's joy within every circumstances, and our job as the devotee, our job as the disciple, is to try to extract that in every situation. Swamiji used to say, when he was put out of SRF, he he said he could feel his consciousness on a couple of different levels. He says on a day-to-day level, he was in a very despondent state. He was not happy, and on a day-to-day level, you might say, because this great tragedy had happened to him. And he said, but it was very interesting. He says, but on a deeper state, he was always aware that on a deeper state, there was a deep calmness there of Master's grace, Master's presence. Now, sometimes he felt that what the pain was not the outward circumstances that had happened to him. The pain was that it clouded and put a veil a little bit between him and his attunement with his guru. And he was worried about, that's what he said was causing the real pain. He says, but even so, behind that, there was always this consciousness of joy was there. And it was his choice in every circumstances to attune himself to that joy, to accept that joy, or not. And one of the interesting things that I've found in my own life, I've noticed that as well, that there's always joy there if I choose it. But for some strange reason, sometimes I don't. I sometimes feel that because I'm so caught up in the ups and downs of you might say the waves of feeling of success, failure, happiness, sadness. I'm so accustomed to those that I hang on to it. There's an attraction to the duality of this life, even when that duality is painful sometimes. You know, the person says, well, I'd rather feel pain than feel nothing. And so maybe it's a lack of faith that joy is really there. But nevertheless, the awareness of it is there. And the tendency of you could say the attachment to the ups and downs of life keeps us bound into that way, into those waves of suffering, pleasure and pain that people have been enduring for lifetime after lifetime. And you could say it's like the bird in the cage. The door is open and the bird knows that the door is open, but you can see the door and you can see freedom there, but it doesn't want to go out. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't want to fly out into freedom. And we are like that. The door is open. Sometimes it takes a while before us to recognize that. But then when we do recognize that, it takes that courage to step out and to go out into that world of freedom that awaits us. And this is, I think, the courage to do that is you could say the journey. It'll certainly, maybe it's not the first step on the journey, but it's a step on the journey to put one's faith in the Guru, put one's life in the Guru's hands, and answer affirmatively to the invitation that God is giving to each one of us to trust in the Lord. Divine Mother's calling us to grab our hand, but yet we run away. Just like that poem, The Hound of Heaven. He was running and running and running, and he felt that the hound was chasing him, going to catch him, going to destroy him, until finally he could run no more. And he looked and he saw that it was not a hound of heaven, it was God, all that time chasing him, to catch him, to be able to lift him up into the light. But yet he was afraid. And I think in the same way, we also sometimes are like that. And so we offer ourselves to God and have faith that God will be there for us. And I think this is the discipline and the strength and the tapasya we need, is to resist that tendency to go back out, to be called back out into the cage, to say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I know I'm afraid, but I have faith. God is with me. I feel God's joy guiding me in everything I do. And we hold on to that. Hold on to it. And you'll find ultimately it's true. God's hand is there. You might say it's what we thought was darkness was but the shade of thy hand blocking out momentarily. It was the shade of thy hand blocking out the light as it reached down to grab us, to draw us up into the light. And so how do we do this? Every moment, whatever comes, coming from God, see God's hand at work and respond to the degree that we can joyfully. Now, I know that's not an easy thing to do, but we can practice. Thank you, God. That's what a friend of mine would always say. And everything that would come, he would have, whatever trial would come, I remember once we got a parking ticket, and he picks it and he looks at it and he says, "Thank you, God." Now he was a little bit of a game he was playing, but nevertheless, the attitude, I mean, the direction was a good one. And I think if we can see, but not just on the surface, go in and feel that in the heart. And I wake up in the morning and I try to say, "Thank you, God. Another day. This is going to be the best day of my life. Thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity." And yes, I grumble, but I keep trying. And I think that's all we're asking one another to do, isn't it? It's just to keep trying. And that's what Master is asking of us. Face your challenges with joy. And you'll find that in time, you'd look back and you say, what were all those challenges anyway? It was just God, you might say, helping me. And every action then became a Kriya action in response to that. Some action that was going to help me become free of whatever karma was there in the past. So God bless all of you on this day of the solstice. And we enter a new phase. You know, Swami Sri used to say that these days, special days like this, astrologically significant days, astronomically and astrologically, they have a special power to them, and he used to celebrate on those days. So I think today's the International Yoga Day, and I think that's a very appropriate day on which to celebrate that. International Yoga, International Union with God, the day that all of us can come together and find our common bond, our commonality through the practice of yoga, through the practice of Kriya, through the practice of becoming one with God. So God bless all of you, and I will see you all again next Monday. Joy to you.